Hyper Aggro is probably the best deck to use on the Pixelborn ranked ladder currently. In the space of 20 games, I took an 80% win rate, and in this video I plan to teach you all the things I learned on the way and how you can pilot it to the same success. This is Hyper Aggro and welcome to my deck guide. So the name of the deck tells you exactly how to play it. Basically, you just want to play all these understated, cheap units that just quest for a lot, play them on the board and turn them sideways and hope that you win before your opponent has an answer. So on our quest for 20 lore, we have lots of options to protect our questers. The most obvious option from set 1 would be Simba. This card has bodyguard and it only costs 2, meaning that you can have the option to protect your cheaper units from as early as turn 2. Simba has really good stats as well, so it's important to keep in mind that it can trade really well with your opponent's 1-drops. Set 2 also introduced this whole new archetype of bouncing cards back to our hand with Madam Mim cards. So we have the Snake and the Fox. The Snake is really good for bouncing back your cheap units and then replaying them, so you can bounce back your Lilos or Maleficents and then pay an extra 1 ink to play them back on the board so your opponent can't attack into them. We also have the Madam Mim Fox, which is really good at doing the same thing, but this one has Rush and it has really good stats. We can also pair this with the Merlin package, which I've spoken about a lot on the channel already. The Rabbit allows you to draw a card, and the Goat allows you to gain a lore every time he leaves play and whenever he enters play. This is really good for just ending the game in ways that your opponents can't react to. Another card is Arthur. When this card quests, you can return a chosen character back to your hand to gain 2 lore, meaning that if you just have an Arthur and a Lilo on the board, for example, you can quest for some crazy numbers. We also have lots of card draw, as previously mentioned with the Rabbit. We also have Friends on the Other Side, which can be sang with the new Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, since this card has Sing of Free. So a cool thing you can do is play Cinderella, and then on the next turn you can sing Friends on the Other Side, bounce back to Cinderella with a Mim Snake, and then you have your 3/3 on the board. Although that's a little slow for this deck, it's still one of the many options you have for the utility that this deck can provide. The deck has some really good matchups against a lot of the meta decks, but is basically a guaranteed loss to anything steel. You can still beat steel if they don't draw very well, but you're more relying on your opponent misplaying and not finding what they need than you actually outplaying your opponent. Against decks like Pawpsicles and Control and any other deck that wants to play aggro, you should have a really good matchup, because against the aggro decks you can just outpace them, and then against these control decks they don't really have enough answers to continuously answer your cheap units questing for a lot. I specifically want to point out Pascal, as he is very strong in the Pawpsicle matchup since they don't really have a way to deal with the evasive keyword. The main thing I want to pinpoint with this deck is the Mulligan. The Mulligan is the most important aspect of the whole deck, and honestly, aggro as an archetype. Making sure you can guarantee the first 3 turns go well for you is how you're going to find a lot of success with this deck. Because the deck runs so many aggressive options, you have a lot of ways to kind of maneuver through the Mulligan and make sure you have a very strong start. The most aggressive start we can look for is 3 1-drops, 2 Maleficents and a Lilo, something like that. That way you're going to be questing for 6 as early as turn 2, which most decks just really can't compete with. And even in your worst matchups, doing that, your opponent needs to find answers really quickly. Against more mid-range styles of play, they're going to have a 1-drop almost every time. So we're going to play Simba on turn 2 to follow up from our 1-drops, meaning that our Simba is going to positively trade into most 1-drops in the game, and even if it only trades 1 for 1, you're still questing for at least 4 with your previously played 1-drop. Because we run a high amount of uninkables in this deck as well, in this specific list being 19, it's important to mulligan away your uninkables early. Obviously you want to keep the Pinocchios and the 1-drops, but Merlin Rabbits you can safely mulligan away to find cards just to be inked. Most of the time with this deck you're going to be inking Doc, or Cinderella, or Be Our Guest. So that's really it for the deck breakdown. I'm going to play some games now, and hopefully I can show the deck in action. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, comment for any other decks that you want to see, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, going second, not what you ideally want to see, but the mulligan looks good. And if there's one thing I want to preface about this whole deck, is that the mulligan needs to be spot on. If you make any wrong decisions with the mulligan, then your whole game plan is just over. You just want to get rid of your uninkable cards, and you want to look for a turn 1-drop of Lilo or Maleficent, and a Pinocchio or a Simba. Obviously, depending on matchups, if you're playing best of 3, you ideally want to like make the better decision for those. But for ladder, either one is fine, just because you don't know what you're going to be against. So either one is good. As long as you see one of those, you're good. Another thing you can do is look for 3 1-drops, like 3 Lilos, 3 Maleficents. But for this, I'm just going to ink Be Our Guest and drop a Maleficent down. It might be better to drop Lilo down there, because then it only reveals that you're playing Amber, whereas I've just revealed the whole deck, so maybe make that little change. It doesn't matter too much, but obviously if you're trying to really optimize, you would want to do that. Now the inked on Maui, so we're probably going to be against Ruby Amethyst Control, which I think we should have an okay matchup. So we're against Amber. Okay, so we're playing against Amber Ruby. So I think the matchup for this is quite good. I've not really seen Amber Ruby too much, but this should be fine. Opponent hasn't done anything for 2 turns, so we're looking really solid, to be honest. So we can go ahead and ink one of these befuddles. I don't think we're going to need 2 of them. I think Pascal might be pretty good in this matchup. And then we'll just go for Pinocchio and then quest with the Maleficent and pass. And it really is as simple as that. Next turn, we could drop 3 1-drops just because there's not really a wide board clear that Amber Ruby has. We could also drop Arthur. Arthur allows us to protect our units, so we could also go that route. Like I say, either one is fine. Befuddle's really good as well. It punishes your opponent for not playing any 2-drops. So if you play a 1-drop, they skip turn 1, you play another 1-drop, or you play like a 2-drop or something, and then on turn 2 they play a 2-drop, you can just bounce it back and it buys you a whole turn. It's really solid. You can also use it to protect your cards, like I spoke about previously. Just there's a perfect example right here. So what I can do is I can, let's let them play the turn out actually. Kind of hoping for just a pass. That's really good for us. Cool, so what we can do here is we can probably ink this Friends on the Other Side. Probably would have want to ink one of these Arthurs, obviously we can't. But if we go Lilo, Pascal, and then Befuddle, bounce Simba back, this game is basically over, right? So we're at 7 ink, and we're questing for 8 next turn. Yeah, I don't think the opponent can do much from this point forward. It's just so much tempo. If they played that Simba a turn earlier, I probably would have kept both of the Befuddles. We are a bit low on card draw since we did ink the Friends on the Other Side. So one of the issues with this deck as well is that you do run a lot of uninkables, but it's fine. Like I say, you just want to end the game as quick as possible. This Queen of Hearts doesn't have a rush or anything like that, so we can just go for an Arthur and then turn everything sideways. Opponent is nowhere near 7 ink, which is the danger zone for Ruby, since they have Be Prepared. But yeah, I think this game is practically over. There's not much they can do here. They can play Maui for like rush. They have a lot of rush units, but I still don't think it's enough, because if we quest with Pascal and then quest with Arthur, bounce back Pascal, like it's just basically over from there. And that's kind of what you want to do with this deck. You don't need to ink every turn. You just want to be super aggressive, just really want to end the game as soon as possible. Turn 6 is like the final turn of the game with this deck. If you're not done by turn 6, you're probably lost. There are still ways you can do it with Goat and stuff like that. But yeah, like this Maui is going to attack this Maleficent. I don't know why they didn't attack the Pinocchio instead. I assume the Queen of Hearts is just going to do that. They are going to draw some cards, but like I say, the Arthur is going to give us the extra lore that we need. Another card that is really good at getting the extra lore is the Goat is really good. But yeah, this is just a perfect example of how this deck functions. So yeah, we can just go ahead and quest with Pascal, quest with Lilo, and then we can quest with Arthur, bounce back anything, and that will be a win. So simple as that with this deck. Okay, going second again, and the Mulligan looks fine. We've got the other opener that we were looking for, which would be Simba and a 1-drop. So I'll probably get rid of Arthur and keep everything else. The reason for this is it enables me to look for this exact thing of 3 1-drops of Maleficent, Lilo. Just so we have both options in hand, and then we can just use the Simba as ink if needed. So we are against Tamatoa, so this is another solid matchup, I'd say. Pascal is really good in this matchup, but just based on this hand, I am going to go ahead and ink one of the Pascals, and then just chuck out a Maleficent. Again, this is good because it does only show that we're playing Amethyst, although it is pretty obvious at this point that we're playing Amber Amethyst. The opponent isn't able to make an 100% decision on that being the case. Hopefully they don't play anything here. So they do play Noi, which is going to be quite good for them. But the good thing about this is I can go ahead and ink the Pascal, and then I can go for the other option of playing a Simba instead of 3 1-drops, because this is a counter to the Noi. We are a little bit slower, but because we're protecting the Maleficent, it's a trade-off that we are more than happy to do. And then if we top deck another 1-drop, we can just go Maleficent, Lilo, and then whatever the 1-drop is. We have inked both our Pascals, and Pascal is really strong in this specific matchup. But like I say, the Simba is just way better here, because it can honestly trade 1 for 1 with the Noi. They are ramping, but spending that ink early game to do this isn't even a problem for us, really. And they're even just going to go ahead and quest with the Noi, which is just fantastic. So we can go ahead and... thinking if I want to ink this snake, and I think inking the snake here is fine, and I can go for Arthur. A little bit slower, but because there's not really any pressure on the Simba right now, we can be a little bit more calculated in what we do. The idea here is we can go Arthur into Arthur and a 1-drop, and then we can just have 2 1-drops on the board protected by Simba, and then the Arthur is just going to bounce them back and gain a lot of lore that way. We do also have friends on the other side to draw some more cards, so we have a lot of options here. The opponent does only have 2 cards in hand, and they're still opting to quest with the Noi, which I think is incorrect. I think you just want to trade 1 for 1 with the Simba here, or even using the Shield of Virtues are fine here as well. So we can use Befuddle. I think we don't really need to. I can honestly ink Befuddle, and then I think here we are definitely happy to just draw some cards, take this time to refill our hand a little bit. We do find Goat, which is really solid, and then we can go Maleficent, Simba, and then Quest of Arthur, and then we can bounce back the Maleficent, and then play the Maleficent back. We could play the other Maleficent, but it's important to order like this, just so our opponent doesn't know what we have in our hand. And it's just these little things like this that are going to get you the extra lore that you need, and make your opponent unsure of what to do. The danger for this deck is 7 ink, just like the last matchup. For any Ruby deck, you want to be careful for the 7 ink mark, because that's when they can start playing Be Prepared. But our hand is pretty full, that I'm not really too stressed out. We can go ahead and get rid of this Maleficent. We could get rid of the Simba, honestly, at this point, but I think just protecting it's fine. I will actually get rid of the Simba here. Feels fine to me. They can attack with the Noi, but the Arthur is still fine. We can just go for Arthur, another 1-drop here. And yeah, we're pretty good. The opponent only has 1 card in hand. The Tremaine's annoying. We even top decked another Simba, which is just actually fantastic. So we can go ahead and play this Bodyguard. The Tremaine can get past it, but that's fine as well. And then we can just honestly go Lilo, and we're not going to play this Maleficent. We're going to quest with this Maleficent, and then play Arthur, and then bounce back this Maleficent, and then play the same Maleficent back down. Again, just making sure that the opponent doesn't have any options. We could go ahead and ink this Goat and then play this other Maleficent, but we don't need to. We have more than enough on board to secure the 20 ink. And if they go for a Be Prepared, then we're just basically lost from that point because we got rid of all our cards. They do only have 1 card in hand, so it's looking pretty good for us here. They are questing, so it looks like they are going to get ready for a Be Prepared. So that's fine, honestly. If we inked the Goat and then went for Maleficent, we'd still be in an okay spot, but not the best spot. So yeah, we just go for Arthur and Maleficent here. And then the opponent basically needs to top deck Be Prepared, or they lose this turn. And yeah, that's basically just how you want to pilot this deck, really. They find a Let It Go, which, you know, isn't the worst thing ever. They're still just in top deck mode. We're in a really good spot here. So we can just go Quest with Maleficent, and then we can go for Goat, and that's basically it. As soon as this Goat, they have a 1-turn timer to do anything. If they use Be Prepared, they lose. If they get rid of this Goat in any way, they lose. And if they end their turn, the Goat will just quest. And that's another great example with this deck. Okay, going first this time. Since the first couple games were quite short, as they would be with an aggro deck, I figured I'd just play a third game. Again, we have Pinocchio and Simba in hand. I'm going to keep both of them, and I'm going to honestly get rid of these 2 unincles, just because we really want ink. We do have options to Simba and Pinocchio, so we're not going to really want to play 3 1-drops here, just because we have the options. We do have Cinderella. And Cinderella's good because you can sing Friends on the Other Side. I'm just thinking if it's really worth it. It does honestly just depend on what the opponent's playing, but I think just with this hand in particular, I'm going to go ahead and ink the Cinderella and play Lilo. It does, again, hide the fact that we are playing Amber Amethyst. We could be playing a different version of songs. We are against Steel, so this is a really bad matchup for us, so hopefully this goes well for us. But this is probably the worst deck you could play against. The Captain Hook is quite annoying too. I am going to go ahead and ink the Friends on the Other Side and play Simba. Again, this is still hiding the fact that we're playing aggro. And if the opponent does want to trade Simba for Captain Hook, I'm fine with that. Next turn I can just go for Pinocchio, Pascal. That could be quite annoying for the opponent to deal with. They do have their own Cinderella there. But ending a turn to play Beast Mirror, this is fantastic for us. I'm just not too threatened by what the opponent is doing here. They do have Befuddle. We'll just go ahead and ink that. And then we'll go for a really aggressive Pinocchio and Pascal. And then next turn we can Mim, or we can do Friends. We'll most likely do Friends just to see some more cards. We're kind of playing against, just like with Ruby, we're playing against Be Prepared. Against Steel, you're playing against Grab Your Sword, which obviously you can play 2 turns earlier, so it's a lot more scary. They have revealed that they're playing Sapphire. So still Sapphire, they're probably going to be going for late game, whereas we're going to be going for super early game. They are going to have grab swords, but other than that, we just have 2 turns till we get there. So I think spending a turn to draw some cards is honestly the correct play, even if we do draw some aggressive cards here. Go for a Tiana, that's fine as well, and another hook. So again, this is fine. I'm definitely going to go ahead and draw some cards. And then I can honestly, I think I'll ink this Be Our Guest, and then I'm going to befuddle this Tiana. Just slows them down. And buys us a lot of tempo, which is the main thing you want to do with this deck. Turn 4, we're already at halfway point of 10. I'm expecting the hook to take out the Pinocchio, and then we could just use Madam Mim after we've quested with Lilo, and it protects the Lilo as well as getting rid of this Captain Hook, which is the way to do things in my opinion. Madam Mim can also sing friends on the other side, but it's mainly there just for those quick removals. So they are going to smash and then get rid of Pinocchio, so that's not the best for us, but it's okay. It's not the worst. The opponent is still playing quite slow, and we're already at 10, so if we can find a goat relatively soon, we're in quite a good spot. So we'll definitely quest with Pascal. And then honestly, I think if I go LeFou, and then ink Mim, and then we can draw 2 more cards. The reason for that is just because Pascal has evasive, so bouncing it and protecting it isn't really going to do much anyway, because the opponent doesn't really have a way to deal with it. Obviously they can use some sort of ping onto this LeFou, get rid of it, and then Pascal loses evasive, but that still trades 1 for 1 with the hook, and they've used quite a lot of resources on this LeFou. And then, yeah, that's not too bad for us. And then next time we can go for Simba and Maleficent, just you know, constantly applying this pressure that the deck sets out to do turn after turn. But they are at 5 now. They should be at 5 ink relatively soon, so we are constantly playing around the grab swords from this point forward. Simba is also good at that because that's free health. They're inking a smash, which is yeah, okay, so there's grab, which is fine. We drew some cards last turn, so we can go ahead and fill our board up with Simba Maleficent, and then hopefully we draw a cheap card here. Cinderella is great as well. So I shouldn't have put the Simba into bodyguard there. I should have just played it active. Reason for that is because the hook can just trade into it now rather than next turn, so we've missed out on 1 lore there. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I've misplayed there. I just played the cards too quickly, wasn't thinking. But if you are sat and you really trying to win your game, definitely make sure that you play the Simba in the active position there instead of bodyguard. Because if we go to 19 here and we lose the game off of that, then that will be the reason there. So it's just important to know, even if you do make misplays, just learn from it. So there's a misplay, so you know, I make sure for the rest of this session and hopefully for the rest of my time playing this game, I don't do that. Yeah, so they are going to trade the hook for this. Do find Merlin, which is good. It's going to draw some cards. We do find another Simba, so definitely just go ahead. Do I want to quest? The opponent is in top deck mode, so I think not questing here is actually okay. Normally I would say you just want to go as fast as possible, but because the opponent doesn't have any options in hand, I'm honestly feeling quite good. And I think protecting with Simba here is really good as well, because if they want to get through the Simba, they're going to have to use the Cinderella and their own Steel Simba, which trades 2 for 1, which is fantastic for us. Whereas if we were to quest with the Maleficent and the Cinderella here, they could just go Cinderella into Cinderella and then Simba into Maleficent, and they would be up 2 characters to our Merlin Rabbit. Whereas I think just waiting here is fine. Like I say, if they did have a bigger hand, you'd probably want to quest with all of it, and just kind of, you know, hope that you draw a goat relatively soon. But for now, it doesn't really matter too much. And honestly, what we can do is we can trade this rabbit into this Simba here. Slows them down. It gives them... we do lose 1 lore again, but again, it's not really too much of an issue. And I think I will draw a card with this rabbit, and hopefully we find an inkable, which we don't. But we could just ink this Simba, play this Pinocchio, and then quest with everything. Maybe Simba was better, but you know, as long as they don't find grab, we just win the game. And if they do find grab, we're drawing cards off of these rabbits anyway, so it's not too much of an issue. Realistically speaking, they're not going to have too many ways to clear this board. They do have the Tinkerbell, which is slightly annoying, but again, we're not in too much danger just because the opponent doesn't have you know, any cards in hand. So I think they're playing a Tiana kind of deck. So there maybe the symbol would have been a bit better. We could go for LeFou here, but if we go for LeFou, they are just going to clear the whole board. So we're going to want to play this LeFou when we have an empty board with nothing exerted, so then the Tinkerbell can't just ping it. And if they want to clear our board, they are going to have to let us draw some cards anyway, so that's fine by me. Like I say, hopefully we can find a goat relatively soon. Goat's kind of the end game that you want with this deck, because it just gets you the extra numbers, and then if they remove it, then you're gaining more lore, right, which is the best thing you want. So drawing 2 cards here off of this. There's a goat that we were speaking about, and now this just really applies the pressure to our opponent. So if I go goat, we go to 17, so we can just go for LeFou here, just because it has more health, and this plays around a second Tinkerbell, whereas if we play Pinocchio and they play Tinkerbell, that wipes the Pinocchio out, whereas now they need a grab, which they don't have. Obviously they do have some Beast Mirrors to find some more options, but we're just going to keep the goat on board, and then we're just going to keep play 1 card at a time, because all their stuff is AoE, like relatively. We can just play 1 card at a time and then make them have consistent answers for the cards. But we're looking in a very good spot here. Like I say, holding this LeFou as well until we have only unexerted characters is a great way to do things. And then we can just quest with these cards, or we can even just like attack this into this, just for a stylish way to do it, I guess. And there's a win against Steel, which is our worst matchup. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. If there's any decks you want to see, make sure to comment down below. I'm going to prioritize covering the more meta decks. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.